This video is going to be about Irish politics, so it'll probably not interest most of you. Just turn off. But some people have asked me about things and stuff like that I want to talk about going on here. Now, as you know, I hate politics. I don't want anything to do with it. But that doesn't mean I don't pay attention. To me, it's like a form of anthropology. I just study them like they're wild animals or something and see how they behave and what's going on. Now, there is a tremendous amount of anger against the present regime in this country right now that you wouldn't know about because the mainstream media is basically paid to be fluffers of the government. But let me tell you, we're not far from a Ceausescu moment here in this country. Not because, and the only thing keeping it down is the country's very rich and everyone's making lots of money. Or, there's no poor people really in this country. But what's really doing it is the refugee thing. This is the powder keg that's going to blow. Now, the immediate reaction from the left and from the government parties is anyone who even questions this is a bigot and a racist and hates refugees and this kind of thing. No, that's nothing to do with it. The reason is because there are no hotel rooms left basically in the country. All the hotels in Donegal and many of them in Sligo and all around the country are full of refugees, most of whom are not Ukrainian. There are people piggybacking upon the suffering of the Ukrainian people, which speaks volumes to the character and nature of the kind of person who would piggyback upon the suffering of someone else. For instance, the kind of people that the left and the establishment in this country are currently defending as sainted beings of light, would be the equivalent to, say, English people going to America during the famine and trying to claim that they were starving Irish and need help. That's that's how bad it is, okay? So you're having, I would never, no normal person or person with a sense of decency or ethics would capitalize upon the suffering of another nation to use for their own benefit. And that's happening with Ukraine. So the majority of these so-called Ukrainian refugees are not Ukrainians. Nobody is a fucking racist for pointing that out. And anyone who would call somebody a racist or a bigot or a hater for pointing that out is probably as low as you can absolutely can get. The reason why they're pointing it out is obvious. Our tourist industry is being destroyed. Our welfare system, our healthcare system, our medical system, our school systems, everything has massive bottlenecks in it because this weirdo fruit, the Minister for Peter Tatchell, Roger O'Gorman, is actually decided, told the whole world, if you're a welfare tourist, come to Ireland. Now, I have all the empathy in the world for people who are genuine refugees. Yes, I don't blame anyone who wouldn't want to fight for Zelensky, and I also don't blame anyone who lives in a war zone who wants to get out. No problem with that. I also don't have any problem with anyone from anywhere else in the world being a refugee. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when I was a little kid, the Vietnamese refugees in Ireland. And those people were a mess. Lots of them had been damaged by Agent Orange. I remember well the Romanian refugees from Ceausescu's time, the children who had been all neglected and everything. The millions of children raised in orphanages there. So, all the sympathy in the world is afforded to these people. So this is what's happening right now. Does not make anyone a racist. This makes someone honest. See, the whole left wing thing is about dishonesty and emotions. These are like nitwits who did social studies degrees in college, can't get a job, and have an airy fairy view of reality. They've never worked or lived in the real world. That's why they're all upper middle class. That's why they all have posh accents. That's why so many of them are from the English home counties, living here in Ireland again. The ones who were raised by in a colonial attaché by grandpapa on the veranda. Oh, the colonial attaché in the Transvaal. They're them types. They're all over here going bash the fosh now. To Irish working class people who never had a pot to piss in until the last say 20 years, and now they're begrudging them that by calling them bigots and far right. Now, so that's causing tremendous anger out there, particularly, and this is surprising to me because I know people, I talk to people within the membership of the Fianna Fáil party. The Fianna Fáil party in Ireland is traditionally the mainstream Republican Party in Ireland and the largest party in the country. They were the ones who basically lost the Civil War and came back later as under De Valera, when all the Republican prisoners came out of prison and so on, and formed a political movement called Fianna Fáil, a very, very powerful political party in this country. The other party was Fine Gael. Fine Gael represented the metropolitan elite, the East Coast metropolitan elite in Ireland. South County Dublin, and wealthy farmers, wealthy landowners, people who were not Republicans and wanted to go back into the UK. Traditionally, that's what they represented. And the business interests, the mercantile interests, and so on. Ireland never had a really real left-wing party. I do remember the Labour Party when I was growing up, but they didn't have the power like the Labour Party has in, say, England. There just wasn't the power. I do remember watching the Labour Party Ardishes, which is general meetings, on TV, and they would, when I was a kid, they would close it out by singing the International. Believe it or not, you know, da 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 da, and a thing on the screen behind them saying, forwards to international socialism. But they never really took off in Ireland, never really, except around trade unions, which are paradoxically in Ireland always middle class, government workers, that kind of thing. So there's tremendous anger in Ireland right now, but it's from the most unlikely places. It's from people who traditionally voted for parties like Fianna Fáil. At the present, we don't really have a democracy in Ireland. We have this relationship between the two main parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, which would be equivalent to Democrats and Republicans, Labour and Tories in England forming a coalition. And while the Fine Gael types are not bothered by it because they can bring in all these, they're very devious Fine Gael, extremely devious, psychopathic party by nature. See, they're the ones who brought the Greens into government. So the Greens will be, and put the Greens like Roger O'Gorman and people like that in positions to roll out this globalist stuff. So when the shit hits the fan, which it already is, Fine Gael can go, it wasn't us, it was the Greens. But they brought them in for that purpose, they're patsies. And Fine Gael are an extremely devious bunch. They're the worst kind of people, and sort of like university politics or student unions, which is a nest of psychopaths that go into politics. And Fianna Fáil generally had a huge voter base, ranging from billionaires down to people who clean wash the streets, farmers, factory workers. That's one of the reasons there never was a left-wing party in Ireland, is because kind of Fianna Fáil catered to that. Although they weren't left, they were sort of like centrist right traditionally. And they did have some tremendously dynamic figures in their movement, such as Sean Lamass, who industrialised the country, which, he gets a bad rap, but he brought a lot of prosperity to provincial Ireland, through the growth of industry. And of course, Charlie Haughey, who basically built this version of Ireland we live in now in terms of the economic prosperity. And and like you ask people about like Charlie Haughey now, you say he was a crook. He wasn't a crook compared to what we have now. Charlie Haughey would be right now handing out guns to firing squads to shoot the current regime. That's what things have gone since things have gone since the 1990s. If Charlie Haughey was in government now, he would be arranging firing squads. That's how for the current politicians in his own party, Fianna Fáil, right now. There's still huge numbers of people in Fianna Fáil who can't believe that they're in a coalition with Fine Gael. They're astounded by it. And like a friend of mine whose father was shot by the British Army in the War of Independence, and they're a staunch Fianna Fáil party. His grandfather was shot dead in a battle. He wasn't massacred. It was a battle, and he got shot by the British Army and died. But when he was like 20 or something and had a wife and kid. Well, his son, my friend's grandfather, who I also knew, the last thing he did, he broke his heart at the end of his life to see the party that he devoted his life to, that his father had died for, in a coalition with the basically the Southern Unionists, which is what the Fine Gael traditionally are seen as, the party of the West Britons, the party of the metropolitan East Coast elite, South County Dublin, that kind of thing, North County Wicklow, and wealthy farmers in Kildare and the Golden Vale of Tipperary and stuff like that. All the big money is North Cork. Uh, so what I think will happen, judging by the people I've been speaking to, in the next election, the turnout will be terrible. A lot of people who are members of Fianna Fáil won't vote for them as a matter of protest. They won't quit the party, they won't vote for them. There's also huge sympathy all around the country for what's going on in Ballymun and last night Ballybrack and East Wall and Finglas. And this is where the current government is making an enormous mistake. All they're doing is calling these people far-right thugs, where their own party members are looking at the TV and going, those people are right. And how they know they're right? Because they may operate a business in a part of Ireland depending on tourism, and there's no tourists this year. Why? Because the hotels are full of refugees. Don't call them Ukrainians. The vast majority are simply welfare tourists and opportunists. And they're piggybacking in the most immoral way upon the suffering of the Ukrainian people, which I find is like, how come no one's talking about that? It's, my name is Alfasa Muhambak from Ukrainium. I grew up in Chicken Kiev before the Soviets bombed me. Putin is a bad man. Give me a house. Give me money. That's literally what's going on in this country right now. And to be against that is not bigotry. It's not racism. It's calling out despicable behavior and lack of character. You want to talk, this whole thing, the left are very fond of attacking people based on their character, but they don't attack people who would, piggyback upon the suffering of anyone from a genuine refugee from a war situation. They just call them names. And this is not working because they may be getting away with it on the internet or their little kind of Antifa groups or their little student groups. But if they had any idea how much hatred there is for them amongst Middle Ireland, they would wake up very quickly. Someone like Paul Murphy in Dublin, he has no of the people before Profit, that crowd, and Barrett, they have no idea how hated they are around this country. And not because they're seen as traitors. And yet they have no idea of this because they surround themselves in an echo chamber of middle-class students who go, bash the fash, and all this kind of thing, with the limp fist, bash the fash. Now, again, I'm not coming here from the left or from the right. If the right was causing all of the fuck-ups in country, I'd be on here saying it's the right. Because just like I did all through the 1980s. The right was the problem. The old Catholic right was definitely holding the country back. I don't have any desire to go back to how things were. Now the left is the problem. I'm all about natural law and correction. I'm an anarchist. I don't take sides to either one, but I do look at them and observe them. And I can tell you the left in this country, the far left, are in extreme danger. And anyone who sides with them, which includes the three main government parties, Fianna Fáil, the Greens, who are the ministry for Peter Tatchell, and Fine Gael. The average person sees the Greens as the party now that's a bit funny in terms of its attitude towards sexualising children. There was a meeting at the National Boxing, of course, wasn't covered by the media. You see, the Irish mainstream media is this is every Irish newspaper right now, right? This is every Irish radio, TV broadcast. Here's what they're all saying right now. The government is wonderful, and that's it. And anyone who has a problem with their policy is a flat-eared moron. That's every piece of mainstream journalism now. And it's not working. It's working among the metropolitan elites and the echo chamber and the rural and regional and provincial elites. But they're all trapped in like the far left elites. But that's all their little echo chambers, the NGOs. They're frantically trying to buy a new reality by spending money on NGOs. It's not working. If they had any idea of the hate, it's not just that they're anger, it's visceral hatred. The Ceausescu moment is just around the corner. All it would take would be a collapse in the economy, and you would get the piano or concerto. I've no doubt about that. I talked to ordinary, decent, hard-working Irish people of all political persuasions and they're all pissed off, with the exception of the traitors in the far left, who have a hatred of being Irish. See, they're a new metropolitan elite. They're the new, West Britons. They just want to destroy Ireland, for the hell of it, because they had unhappy childhoods, or they were some rich kid whose daddy didn't get them a pony when they were 9, so they wanted to destroy Ireland. Or they're from, they're foreigners. They're English poshies. I'm not talking about English people. I'm talking about the English elite who all have moved here, and are deciding to, like I told you about that 15-minute city meeting they had in one town here in the west of Ireland. The entire stage was filled with like English people, home county accents. We need to implement a 15-minute city into the community, and all the Irish people looking at them going, "What the fuck?" And quite rightly ignored them. But there's a lot of that going on. It's over big time here, and I have no doubt. I think Fine Gael will win the next election by a landslide. Why? Because all their party members are, now there is hope there too. Their youth group have come out against their youth wing have come out against the hate speech law. Very positive, but generally they're mainstream voters who just worship. See, it's all about narcissism and self-worship, and weakness and mediocrity. They're all sitting there worshipping themselves. I think a lot of Fianna Fáil members won't vote for the party. They'll stay in the party, but they won't vote. And because many of them will be from families whose great grandparents and great grandparents died to free this country. And they're not going to vote for someone who wants drag queens with their balls hanging out in front of 5-year-olds. They're not going to they'll vote for a party that genuinely brings in real refugees, but not ones who brings in places from welfare tourists who are piggybacking on this, and who are already causing. I'm not going to say there's nothing wrong with anyone for being a foreigner, but you kind of have a situation where you have catastrophic, impacts upon the healthcare, education, and social services, and destroy the whole hotel industry by trying to prove how wonderful you are. That's what it's all about. This is why they put the brakes on the hate speech law. The Irish elite don't care about the Irish people. When the 78% of the Irish people says, no, we don't want a hate speech law, they ignored them and said, we don't care what polls say. Polls are not accurate. As that Varadkar would say. He's like a robot. Well, that's what he is, basically. He's a flesh robot. But it wasn't until the likes of Elon Musk, Jordan Peterson, and numerous foreign news agencies started saying, have you seen what the Irish government are proposing in Ireland? That the foreigners, we look bad. I'm mortified. The foreigners we're looking bad in front of foreigners. Cancel the hate speech law. That's what they're like. But they didn't give a fuck about the 78% of the Irish people who wanted it. That's what you're dealing with in this country. And you think that's not being noticed by the average person? Do you think the average person is not noticing that it's government by... the reason that the present regime is full of mediocre animals and simpletons from well-heeled families who have only one agenda, using their current position in Ireland to lobby for future jobs in the EU, globalists and UN. That's really what they're doing. The Mary Robinson was an Irish president who, before her term ended, took a job in the United Nations. Why? Because she only wanted a career. She didn't give a fuck about the Irish people. Just wanted a career, a top player in the globe. She was a lefty as well, a rich lefty. They're all the lefties in Ireland. They're all rich. The working class would never support the left, quite rightly. So it's really interesting from an observer point of view. We had a situation in Ballybrack, which is in South County Dublin. The video in room 313 where I showed the dolmen in the middle of a housing scheme in South Dublin at Ballybrack. Where that dolmen is, there was basically a Belfast 1969 level riot against the police here, the Garda, and I find that ironic. It took place right beside a dolmen. I also the anger was not like we'd seen in what we seen in Ballymun was like, and Finglas, and what we saw in Ballymun and Finglas and East Wall was this: Want to fucking take us on? You want to take us on? What I saw in Ballybrack last night was, it's on. Pay heed, metropolitan elite, because those people in Ballybrack have the majority of the support of the people of this country. Rural, provincial, left-wing, old-fashioned left-wing, right-wing and centrist. Those people, you calling them far-right and attacking them, is only going to make you come closer to your Ceausescu moments. I want a job in the United Nations.